The phone wouldn't stop ringing. I lay stretched out on my worn-out couch in a modest one-bedroom apartment on the east side of Atlanta. The evening sun slanted through the blinds, carving quiet lines of gold across the faded floorboards. One hand cradled a chipped ceramic mug filled with lukewarm tea. The other rested over my eyes, as if I could block out the blinking light of the phone vibrating on the coffee table a few feet away. Buzz, pause, buzz, again. I didn't need to look. I already knew the names that would be on the screen. Mom, Dad, Brandon, the same 3 names I had silenced 6 months ago. Back then, I had walked out of that house like someone walking away from a long, slow-burning fire. No panic, no fanfare. Just a quiet, resolute exit. I packed a few clothes, my old laptop, and a leather-bound finance notebook I couldn't part with. There was no screaming match, no dramatic declarations. The air had been still, eerily so, as I stepped outside just before dusk. The buildings, across the street, cast long shadows, and not one of them followed me to the door. No one stopped me. No one asked where I was going. Maybe because they assumed I'd come back, like always. Diana, the good daughter, the reliable one, the one who stayed up late budgeting bills that weren't hers to pay, the one who knew the passwords to everyone else's bank accounts but could never afford a vacation of her own. I thought maybe the silence would follow me here, but it didn't. Instead, it found me 6 months later in the form of digital desperation, missed calls, voicemails left in bursts, text messages full of ellipses and guilt. Buzz. I closed my eyes. It had taken me years to understand what freedom actually sounded like. And here it was. Not the absence of noise, but the presence of choice. I chose not to answer, not to explain, not to let that screen, that name, that tone pull me back into a life where I gave and they took until I had nothing left. I exhaled deeply, and for a moment, it felt like the air in the room shifted. Lighter, like something heavy had been pulled. Off my chest. They were calling because something was wrong, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to fix it. They used to say I was the strong one, the dependable one, and I believed them for far too long. When I was 16, while my classmates picked out prom dresses and gossiped about who kissed who under the bleachers, I was wiping down tables in a pastry shop 5 blocks from our house. After school, I'd ride my bike there, mop the floors, pack leftover croissants into brown paper bags, and head home long after dark. My first paycheck didn't go toward new shoes or a concert ticket. It bought me a second-hand laptop from a pawn shop so I could keep up with schoolwork while the rest of the house used the main computer. No one asked why I needed a job so early. No one asked if I was eating enough. They just smiled when I quietly slid $20 bills into the jar labeled utilities. Brandon, my older brother, was the dreamer. He was the kid with potential, even when he failed. Mom would hold his face in her hands and say, "At least you're trying." Dad would call him our artist, like his dropped out of art school status was something noble. Brandon had that glow around him, the kind people protect even when it's burning them. And me? I was the one who patched holes in the lifeboat, while they admired the stars. When he needed a new MacBook, they opened a credit card. When I got a full scholarship to Georgia State, their only response was, "That's kind of far, isn't it? Brandon might need the car." The day I was hired by one of the biggest investment firms in the city, Mom didn't ask how I felt. She said, "I hope you'll still have time to help out around here." I was never the favorite, just the fallback plan. I learned how to budget before I learned how to drive. I covered unexpected bills without being asked, just quietly checked the mailbox and paid what needed paying. I was the safety net no one saw, because they never had to feel the fall. And in that invisible role, I became the family accountant, therapist, errand girl, and emotional shock absorber. I thought if I just kept doing the right thing, being the adult in a house full of grown-ups, they'd finally recognize me. But recognition never came, only expectation. And the more I gave, the more I disappeared. So when I lay on that couch, with my phone buzzing like a fire alarm 6 months after I left, it wasn't just a ringtone. It was the sound of a system realizing its engine had gone quiet. The house wasn't broken. The machine was missing its unpaid operator. Me and four. Once I had no intention of clocking back in. It started with something small. It always does. I was at the office, typing out the final paragraphs of a quarterly report, when a message popped up on my screen. Power's out. Can you help? Just until tomorrow. Love you. Mom always ended those texts with a softness that made it feel like a request, not a demand. I didn't hesitate. I transferred $1,260 that night. Just a little help. Just this once. But just once is a funny phrase in my family. It's never just once. That payment became a pattern. 1 month, it was the gas bill. Then the fridge needed repairs. Then Brandon wanted to enroll in an online art course. He's really serious this time, Mom wrote, like she was convincing herself more than me. They didn't call them loans. They called them contributions. But the math was never balanced. Every time I said yes, the next ask came faster. I'd wake up to voicemails from Dad about the water heater, texts from Brandon about investing in himself, messages about groceries and prescriptions and birthday cakes, and I kept saying, yes, not because I didn't know better, but because some part of me still believed that's what family meant. We don't count the cost, right? We give because we love. I told myself they'd repay me when they could, that it would balance out. In the end, but the truth? It was never meant to balance. I had become the safety net again, not because they needed me, but because they knew I wouldn't say no. And each time I paid, I felt my future shrink a little. The trip I wanted to take. The savings I tried to build. The quiet dinners I missed out on because I was too tired from back-to-back shifts. I thought strength meant being the one who holds everything together. But really, it meant I never asked who was holding me. And as the debts grew and their gratitude shrank, a quiet bitterness began to form. Not loud, not sharp, but slow and heavy, like rainwater filling a basement. I didn't realize it yet, but that basement was already flooding. It was a Tuesday. Ordinary in every way. The coffee at the office was burnt, my inbox overflowing, and the Atlanta traffic had me stuck behind a delivery truck for 20 straight minutes. I had just pulled into my apartment lot when my phone buzzed again, at Ain. Here, can you talk? I called back before even taking my keys out of the ignition. His voice was calm. Too calm. We're in a bit of a bind. The house might be at risk if we don't catch up with the bank this month. The house. The same one where I grew up with the cracked tile in the hallway and the faded photo of me and Brandon on the mantle. Modest, aging, but it was home. How? Much? I asked, even before he finished the sentence. Just $980 a month, maybe for a few months, until we get back on our feet. And I said yes. I didn't think. I didn't negotiate. I just agreed. That night, I canceled the deposit I'd put down on a new apartment. It had a balcony and tall windows. I'd been dreaming about it for months. But dreams don't compete with family needs. The first transfer went through before midnight. I thought it would last a season. 4 months, maybe 5. But months turned into years. Nearly 2, $20,000. $20,000. And I didn't live in that house. I wasn't even welcome in it half the time. I'd show up and no one would ask how work was. They'd just hand me a list of things to pick up from the store. No one ever said thank you. It wasn't a home anymore. It was a machine, and I was the fuel. And the strangest part? I still told myself it was worth it, that I was doing the right thing. That this was love. Gritty, thankless, necessary love. But deep down, I was tired. Not just from working, but from being invisible in the very place I was holding together. I'd walk through the front door and feel more like a tenant than a daughter, a ghost with a wallet. The day I realized that, I didn't cry. I just sat in my car outside the house I was paying for and stared at the porch light. It was flickering, and for the first time, I didn't want to fix it. It was Sunday afternoon, when I pulled into the driveway, arms heavy with grocery bags, salmon, vegetables, a few frozen meals. I'd just finished a long weekend shift, and all I wanted was a hot shower, but I made the detour, like I always did, 40 minutes each way, just to stock their fridge. The kitchen light flickered as I stepped in, balancing the bags. Mom was already there, arms crossed. We need to talk, she said. Before I could put anything away, she launched into it. Not a conversation, a verdict. What you're sending every month. It's not enough anymore. I blinked. Not enough? Dad stepped in from the living room, voice low and rehearsed. You live alone. You make good money. Meanwhile, we're drowning here. Doesn't that seem unfair to you? Unfair. The word pulsed in my ears. I looked at the two people I'd carried for years, who called me strong only when it benefited them, now telling me that my independence was a luxury they resented. Brandon, sprawled on the couch like a sultan on holiday, didn't even look up. It's not like you're struggling, he muttered. What's wrong with sharing a little? I turned to him, my voice steady. Sharing goes both ways, Brandon. You've never once offered anything back. Mom snapped. That's enough, Diana. You're being disrespectful. Disrespectful. I felt the floor tilt under me. My chest tightened. I'd given them everything, and this was what I got in return. If it's that much of a burden to you, Mom said, her words like cold blades, then walk out that door and don't bother coming back. Time froze. She meant it as a threat, but to me, it was freedom. I set the last grocery bag on the table, didn't unpack it, didn't open the fridge. All right, I whispered, and I left. No one followed. The door didn't slam. It clicked shut, soft, final. Rain had started to fall. Not a storm, just a steady drizzle, soaking through my sweater by the time I reached the car. I didn't turn around. Didn't check to see if anyone watched me leave. They didn't. The bags I'd carried in, still sitting untouched on the kitchen counter, were the last offering I'd ever make. I drove in silence, headlights cutting through wet pavement. When I got home, I didn't take off my shoes. I walked straight to the table, set my phone down, and tapped the block button on every contact. Mom, Dad, Brandon. One by one, like closing doors I should have shut long ago. Then I powered the phone, off, left it face down. For 3 days, I didn't look at it. Not because I was angry, I wasn't. I was tired. Tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. Tired of explaining myself to people who'd never tried to understand. Tired of pouring from a cup no one ever refilled. Those 3 days were quiet. No demands, no requests, no emergencies wrapped in guilt, just silence. I made tea. Cleaned the kitchen, opened a window and listened to the rain. For the first time, I didn't feel pulled in every direction. I didn't feel the weight of being the strong one. I just felt here, whole. And in that quiet, I realized something. I hadn't been living my life. I'd been surviving everyone else's. That peace didn't roar. It whispered, and it told me I'd done the right thing. The peace didn't last. 3 months later, my phone buzzed again. A new number, a familiar. Named Dad. Why haven't you paid the mortgage this month? The bank's pressing us now. I froze. Confusion twisted in my gut. I hadn't sent anything for half a year. Why would he expect it now? But something in his tone, not panic, but assumption, made my skin crawl. Like he still believed I was on autopilot. That my wallet would eventually come back online. I made tea, sat down, and opened my laptop. For the first time, I logged into the mortgage account. The one under Dad's name, the one I'd been transferring money to without checking. My fingers hovered, and then I saw it. The last payment made to the bank was 8 months ago, not 6, not when I stopped helping, but 3 months before. I blinked. Refreshed the screen. There it was. Outstanding balance, $6,480. Status, at risk of foreclosure. My mouth went dry. My hands went cold. I had still been sending money, almost $3,000 after the last official payment. Gone. Where had it gone? Not to the house. Not to the thing they'd begged me to save. I stared at the screen, at the numbers. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was theft. And it wasn't accidental. They knew. They knew, and they took. And I had trusted them blindly. That trust didn't just crack, it shattered. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt furious. quietly, completely furious. I pulled out the old finance notebook, the one I'd used in college, still lined. With sticky notes and tiny calculations, I flipped to the back. There, scribbled in neat columns, were dates, amounts, names, payments I'd made, transfers, notes like roof repair, Brandon's laptop, meds for Dad. I had written them down not to demand repayment, but to keep track, to stay sane. Now, they looked like a crime scene. Exhibit AI wasn't just the daughter. I'd become the family accountant, bank, and insurer, with no consent, no interest, and no protection. And they'd lied. I called the bank, voice steady as I explained I was a former contributor. They verified it quickly. Yes, the mortgage account hasn't had a full payment since January. It's in special collections. I thanked her, hung up, and sat there in my kitchen, alone with the truth. My money had vanished. My trust had been sold, and now they were calling, not to apologize, but to collect again. They thought I'd be silent, but they forgot I was watching now, and I had receipts. The phone rang that night. Dad's name lit up the screen, like a warning. I answered. Diana, I guess you found out. I didn't scream. I didn't accuse. I just said, the mortgage is 8 months overdue. I sent money after the last payment. Where did it go? He hesitated. It's complicated. Try me. Silence. Then Mom's voice cut in, sharp and indignant. Don't you speak to your father like that. My jaw clenched. Don't speak to me like I'm the villain. I paid for a house you let rot. You don't understand the pressure we're under, she said. No, I snapped. You don't understand what it's like to give everything and be told, it's not enough. Brandon's voice barged in, smug, dismissive. You're overreacting. They're struggling. You could have helped. I laughed, not with joy, but disbelief. I did help, I said. I helped while you played video games and called it finding your path. I helped when no one even asked if I was okay. You're being selfish, he hissed. No, I replied. For the first time in my life, I'm not. Dad's voice returned quieter. We messed up, but we'll pay you back. I promise. How many times have you promised that? I asked. No answer. If we lose the house, he said, it'll be your fault. I felt the weight of that sentence try to land on my shoulders, but it didn't. I stood taller. Then lose it, I said. That house is not my burden anymore. And I hung up. Not in anger. In peace. After I hung up, I placed the phone face down on the table and didn't touch it again for 3 days. No vibrations, no ringtones, no flashes of guilt wrapped in, please call back texts. The silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. I made coffee each morning and stood by the window as the city stirred below. I opened the curtains and let the light spill in, dust dancing in the warmth. I walked barefoot across the wooden floor of my small apartment, listening to the creak of every board like it was music composed just for me. I had forgotten how good silence could feel when it wasn't stuffed with obligation. I didn't check my banking app. I didn't refresh my inbox. I didn't reread the messages I knew were waiting. I just existed. And in that quiet, I started to see the truth more clearly than ever before. They were never going to stop. Not until I was drained dry. Not until there was nothing left of me but numbers in a ledger they didn't respect. They didn't call me because they loved me. They called me because I was useful, and I had finally stopped being useful. That was my rebellion. Not slamming doors or yelling down phone lines, just becoming unavailable. No apologies, no explanations, just space where they used to be, and in that space, I found myself again. On the 4th day, I picked up my phone and opened the messaging app. I typed, since I was 16, I've paid over $20,000 to this family. Not once did anyone ask if I had enough for myself. You didn't forget the mortgage. You just chose not to use the money. I have nothing left to give and no reason to trust you again. This was betrayal, not miscommunication. I stared at the words, read them again, then again. Every sentence was true. Every line was earned. But after everything, I didn't send it, because they would never hear it the way I meant it. They would twist it into cruelty. They would call me dramatic, cold, ungrateful. I had learned that some battles aren't worth fighting, not because you'll lose, but because the opponent doesn't even recognize the rules. So instead, I closed the message, deleted the draft, and turned off read receipts for good measure. They didn't need my closure. I did. I leaned back against the couch, watching the soft light slip across the ceiling. My heart still ached. Not for them, but for the years I couldn't get back. I missed joy, the quiet dinners I didn't have, the apartment I never moved into. But those regrets no longer had control over me. They were shadows in a room I'd already stepped out of. The next morning, I made coffee slowly. No rush. No list of errands. No voice waiting to guilt me from the other end of the line, just the hum of the kettle and the soft sound of rain tapping against the window pane. I stepped out onto the tiny balcony of my apartment. The city smelled like wet asphalt and fresh starts. I pulled my sweater close and let the cool breeze move through my hair. I looked out at the skyline, cracked buildings and blinking traffic, and for the first time in years, I felt like the life I was building was mine. No strings, no silent contracts, no invisible debts. The air was clear in a way I'd never known, not because everything was perfect, but because I had finally chosen myself. That kind of peace doesn't arrive with trumpets. It comes in quiet moments, like realizing you don't have to answer the phone, like understanding that love isn't proven through sacrifice, like knowing you're no longer someone's safety net. And finally, that's okay. But I won't lie. Some nights, doubt still visits. When the city quiets and the lights dim, I sometimes wonder, did I go too far? Was cutting ties the right choice? Did I abandon them or save myself? Those questions don't have simple answers, and maybe they never will. But this I know. I gave everything I had. I tried for years. I bent until I cracked, and when I finally walked away, it wasn't to punish them. It was to protect the last unbroken piece of myself. I don't need them to call me good. I just need to live without apology. So if you've ever felt like me, like the one who carries too much, gives too often, and disappears in the process, I hope this story shows you something I wish I had learned earlier. You don't have to bleed to be worthy. You don't have to stay just because they expect it. You are allowed to choose peace, even if it means letting go of the people who never truly saw you, because peace, real peace, has a sound. And sometimes, it sounds like your phone not ringing at all.